Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Chucky Season 2, Episode 1. So, this episode, in all honesty, was uncreative and really just stretching. We, of course, via this episode, are to have gone on and had a number of clips from the first season, which would be an obvious thing to do because I'm sure a lot of people would have forgotten a number of things that happened in this show, so they have to get reminded that this is a second season. But not only that, to really showcase the stretching of time, there's one scene that kind of blatantly showcases this, where we, of course, have both Jake and Devin, who not only transition in the beginning of the episode, but then also have to transition by the end of this episode also. And so, in the beginning of this episode, we have Devin and Jake who want to go on and show their love, but they also need to eat up some screen time. And so Jake kind of walks off from Devin, and Devin runs to go and get Jake, and then they are to finally showcase this love. And I was just like, man, clock a running. I'm like, seriously, this is gonna be telling me already that I'm gonna be so disappointed in this season. The way of all of this is to play out. So I'm assuming the way of which that this first episode is to end is how we're going to go on and get our additional characters to have at some point have Chucky kill them off. Because really, in this episode, they don't really add any characters. They don't give a number of additional people that I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be the new season kills. No, it just feels like they were trying to pick up where they left off from the first season, and they couldn't have been bothered to add any additional characters. They're like, oh, no. I think we'll just be fine with the people we already have, and, we'll just give, certain people even more screen time, but it just comes off so hefty as such a stretch here. And so, with that said, this first episode back is obviously just a bad episode. Chucky has to go on instead of, killing a ton of people, which I think that's what should have happened in this episode. Just, hey man, let's just kill off a good, decent number of people this time in this episode. Instead, we just have a lot of teasing going on until the very end of the episode that they have to go on and produce some kind of something here to goofily get people still interested in the show. But man, what Chucky ends up doing by the end of the episode, where he was like, okay, I just need to go on and just continue to wait here. Let's... Are we at almost the 40-minute mark of this episode? God, stretch. So, teeing it up. So, we have both Devin and we have both Jake, who both have foster families, that it seems that it is to possibly tear them apart. And as well as also, we come to find out that Lucy, if she is already not on the drug train, she is going to be picking up an additional drug that she is to heavily use within this first episode. And so we have Lucy's younger sister who gets more screen time in this very first episode, because who else can they really use? We, of course, have Michelle Cross, who is to cleavage her way through this episode. Man, I wasn't noticing it in the first season, or I don't remember if I did notice it, but man, am I noticing it now. Man, just really laying it on thick. But hey, if you got them, you might as well use them or flaunt them or whatever. But I was like, man, Michelle, just putting out the goods, I guess. But anyways, so with that said, uh, as far as like we have a scene with Andy, so Andy is in this episode for what it's worth. Uh, we don't really have much of like legitimately Tiffany in this episode that I could really care about. Um, Chucky, I don't think is really used all that well in this episode. So yeah, so everything just kind of feels so like boring. Like there's a whole like therapy thing that they continue to use, this like therapy element to be used in this episode. And I was like, well, that's another way to just stretch the shit out of this. Uh so with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into that double 5 time territory. Let's go into spoilers. Let's go on. It's about that time yet again to, of course, go into what, of course, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you spoil this episode. So we have Andy who is driving this truck, and we, of course, have Tiffany who is wielding a gun upon Andy's face to have him drive with all of these Chucky dolls. So come to find out, these dolls are starting to get out of these boxes, and we have one doll who, of course, is bald, and he is to go on and ask the other Chuckies. So it's like, well, hey, like, where did you guys get the knife from? And they're like, well, we all got knives. That was like the starter pack for like our boxes. And like this is the one Chucky who's like, well, I guess I was left out. So all of a sudden we have these Chuckies that go on to look at the guy driving and look at Tiffany, and it seems that all three of these dolls are like, well, hey, who is this guy? Like, who is this guy driving this vehicle? He looks very familiar. And so Andy, ends up turning to Tiffany, it's like, oh, like, they don't remember me, and I guess they also don't remember you. So all of a sudden, we start to have Andy that's driving wild, and so that ends up knocking the gun out of Tiffany's hand, which then has Andy then grab the gun, shoot the Tiffany doll to where the head comes off, and then Andy is to try to focus to drive this car off a ledge, trying to go on and take down as many of these dolls as he humanly possibly can. As we also have Andy who is screaming the words for Kyle as he is to fall to his death, trying to bring all these dolls who, of course, are climbing on to the top of the truck. So, car accident or truck accident happens. And so now we just transition. So Devin and Jake are to find out, like, well, hey, I'm with this foster family. Hey, I'm with this foster family. Jake is to mention that he thinks that his foster dad is cool, but he's not quite sure between either Pam or Gary. And so they're like, well, okay, all right, well, Jake, it seems, is to be a little uneasy about public displays of affection. And so Jake is like, man, I really want to kiss you right now, Devin, but like, like I don't think I'm comfortable yet. So Jake goes on and gets in the car. Devin chases after the car and is like, no, we need to go on. We need to kiss here. So they need to start just smooching, kissing, and loving, and stretch for more time. And so after that moment, when finally we have Devin and we have Jake, who are to like really just separate here, uh, we have 6 months pass, and now it seems that Jake is to go on and be doing another Halloween 2. So Jake is with Gary, and Jake is Batman and Gary is Robin, and we consistently have Gary who's making Robin puns. Uh, and so, like, really, we have Chucky who's already quickly getting annoyed with Gary doing all these Robin puns, but it is what it is. So, Jake is going on to want to bring Gary out trick or treating, but then it seems he ends up getting a phone call from this unknown place. And so we have a character who is going on and asking for a girl named Tamara, which I'm not quite sure, but when I heard this, I immediately thought of like the Strangers movie, where we had the one girl who comes to the woman's house and is consistently asking for a girl's name that obviously is not there because like the girl wants to just keep talking to this person. So Jake goes on and tells this person, it's like, well, I'm sorry, hey man, like wrong number. And so Jake kills the call. So we have Jake and we have Devin, and they're kind of talking about things. It seems that also Devin has gotten this phone number also. So this guy continues to call and he's asking for Tamara. And Jake is just like, well, no, this is his wrong phone number. And so we then, of course, have the person on the other end of the line who's like, well, like this number is obviously the right? And Jake is like, well, yeah, but like there's still no Tamara here. And so Chucky is just like, oh, okay. So because Chucky just wants to know that Jake is home, and that, of course, is to be the focus thing here, that like Chucky just wants to like make sure that this guy is home so that way Chucky can go on and do his own voice call or video call at some point. So that way Jake can be at home where he's going to go on and call his friends to try to make them aware that things are going to go horribly awry here. So Jake, it seems, is thinking this is some prank. Jeez, sorry about that. Uh, Jake is to go on and think that this is some prank caller, and so Jake is to think that this is some homophobic guy, and so on and so forth. And so Jake ends up thinking that I think it's Ellis. And Chucky's like, no, this isn't Ellis. And because it's Chucky. And so also Chucky is to mention that he's not homophobic. And like Chucky doesn't go on and give up like who he is and just say like, oh yeah, like if you remember, like I said this and this and this, and then all of a sudden Jake could be like, oh my god, like this is Chucky, because they would have that kind of moment together. But instead, so we had even Jake at one point who is to get a trick or treater who at first looked like Chucky but ends up being some clown. And so we had the moment where like the clown was trying to get in your face, and was to mention that some people have like a phobia of clowns. And I'm just like, because weirdly they end up having to go on and use the same kind of thing later on, where it's like the fear of dolls, the dollophobia, whatever. I'm like, what is this, like phobia day on the Chucky channel? Hey guys, you want to know all the phobias? Let's learn about them on this episode of Chucky. So Devin and Jake, they end up going on to get this third video chat or video call, and it's Chucky going to Lucy's home. And now here's how we can go on and find Lucy and where she's at now. So Lucy is in her room, almost trying to get with this vampire-like guy, and it seems that the more and more like Lucy is getting close to getting intimate with this guy, she then is to pass to go on and start to take drugs. So the ghost who comes in after speaking to Caroline is to mention that he needs to go to the bathroom, and so he ends up going on to go to the bathroom, but then is to beeline to Lucy's room. We also come to find out that Lucy is to, of course, go on and need a different place to live, because if you guys remember, the like a good portion of that home that they had before had burnt down. But not only that, we find out in this episode that Michelle Cross is to have lost her being a mayor, because a number of people had all wanted her to be recalled or like kind of sent packing for being mayor, after the whole number of deaths were to have happened under her nose without her being anywhere aware. So a lot of people are asking for her, like, yeah, you need to resignate, you need to resign, you need to freaking get out of here. But it seems bizarrely that Michelle is not wanting to give up on this position, and we'll get to that in a little bit here. So Devin is to go on and call the cops to Lucy's location. So all of a sudden we have these cops barging in, and so it seems Lucy's like, well, hey, my security alarm didn't go off, and the police is like, well, that's besides the point, because someone had called to tell us that you're a risk. So we have Lucy looking at her text saying like, hey, Chucky's back, like, hey, you need to answer, you need to know this is going on. So we then turn around, and so after Lucy has gone on and dealt with the police and kind of gotten rid of them, Chucky doesn't go on and kill anybody off at this party, or at this moment where like Chucky could have easily killed somebody. Like, Chucky doesn't go on and kill anyone. But I don't think they were throwing a party. I think we just had Caroline, who was kind of handing out candy for trick-or-treaters, and then Lucy was bringing in her vampire boyfriend to just sleep with them. And so, yeah, so I think that was the only thing going on. There might have not have been a party, but anyways. Pushing on. So we have Michelle, who goes on, and she, of course, is having this interview with some reporter who I guess had gone on to do this report before, where Caroline had mentioned that Chucky had spoken to her. Because we also have Caroline, Michelle, and Lucy who are to go to this therapy session, and Mrs. Mixter was to go on and give Caroline this uh, this wedding bell doll that, of course, looks approximately the size of Chucky. And so the reasoning for handing off this doll is because this therapist was a heavy doll collector. And so, since it seems that Caroline has a dollophobia, like, what better way to just kind of give her this doll to make her face her fears and so on and so forth. So, Caroline is now have this doll. Excuse me. And so, we have Caroline in this interview, and this reporter is asking Caroline, it's like, oh, hey, is that your new doll? And Caroline is like, well, yeah, of course it is. And we have the reporter that goes on and says, it's like, well, like, does this doll talk to you too? Because they end up kind of playing back the footage of Caroline stating that Chucky was to tell her to kill. So the guy wants to know if, like, the new doll is telling her anything. Maybe she's just crazy. And so we have Michelle that wants the reporter to just get out of here, like, because not only is the reporter like talking about Caroline, but then also bringing up that Michelle is to try to go on and get reelected as mayor for a second term. So, and plus also that pushes them to another location because they are no longer mayor. So we go on to where do we transition here? Um, we have Jake, who goes on to be with Devin, and then that pushes both Devin and Jake to re-meet up with Lucy, and so now we of course go on, and if we haven't had those phone calls, now when Jake, Devin, and Lucy all meet up together, we have Chucky, who is back with, oddly, this bomb. Oddly enough, with just fertilizer and a certain concoction of homemade things, he makes a homemade bomb. So when Devin and Chuck, or Devin and Jake are in this room, they go on and they're having to just wait for Lucy to come back so Chucky can just release this explosive, because Chucky's just another doll away. And so what one death from one doll would matter to nothing, to where I would just be like, well, you know what, if Chucky should just go on and kill those characters that he's with, he could just bring in another doll to kill Lucy, and that would be the easy way to just pan all of this out. So we have at one point where they come up with like a plan here, as we had Devin, who is to have this taser, and so Devin ends up tasering Chucky, which drops the bomb out of his hands. And so Gary is to grab the bomb and run off with it, and Chucky then is to chase after Gary and turns the bomb off, or turns the bomb on, and let it explode. And so Gary ends up getting killed off in the process. So now we, of course, end up having this therapist, Mrs. Mixer, who is to mention that these kids were playing around with some bomb, and that is the reasoning for uh, for what had happened to Gary, and that these people should go on and go to like juvenile prison. And Mrs. Mixter is to mention that there is her own way to go on and take care of these kids, which is to, of course, be the Burlington County Home for Wayward Boys. So Lucy is a boy now. So, because bring it all the way back to Charles's like youth, where he had to go on and spend at this county house. So we have these three characters that are driving their way via bus to this location, and we have this nun who goes on and sees these characters in. We have Lucy that was to mention that she knows a boy that went here, and so it's like, oh great, like that's probably going to be like the bad boy that's not going to help them out. If anything, it's probably going to cause them problems. So with that said, I think that does go technically on to cover what mostly happens via this episode. Let me know if there is something that I forgot about, because I'm sure that there probably is. Let me know also how you felt about this first episode. And so, with that said, I think I'm going to go on and just trying to uh, get out of here. I'm trying to think if there's anything really left from this episode. There might be a mass number of things that I didn't go on and talk about. Like we also had Chucky that was to mention how there was so much distance between Jake, Devin, and Lucy that it is to have been kind of like Chucky compares it to him seeing all of his like his past victims, because of course he can, because they're all dead. So with that said, yeah, like that in a nutshell covers this episode. I think I'm just gonna go on and get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Goodbye, buddy. We also had the scene with Lucy and Caroline, and we had Lucy who had gone on to take Caroline's doll and started to bash the crap out of it consistently, and also was to try and tell Caroline to never trust these dolls, and also never go on and tell anybody about the dolls, or at some point they'll want to like take her away and put her in some mental hospital. But here's the goofy thing: we have Lucy who just gives her younger sister this kitchen knife and is to tell her to like always keep it handy. And I'm like, what? Like that seems like the goofiest thing to go on and like give somebody. And how are they going to go on and explain that? There is no real easy explanation for that. Like if you could make like a bat and give that to her, that would make a lot more sense. But yeah, so like we had that whole scene, and then we also had the one scene where Lucy is kind of slowly but surely kind of wanting to like walk down the stairs, as we quickly have Jake, who is trying to text Lucy to not come down there, but she ends up going on and going down there anyways because, of course, she was very drugged. And so that's when, of course, Devin goes in there with a taser and takes Chucky out. But I'm just kind of thinking if there's anything left for me to go on and cover. I'm sure there's like huge, massive scenes. Like I know Michelle was going on and also talking to Lucy about Caroline, and so yeah. So other than that, yeah, I think everything else was to, of course, hopefully be covered. If not, there could be a whole rebuttal for next week. So if there is definitely a scene that I forgot about, let me know in the comments below. I'll get to it next week as a real little bit of a rebuttal. But other than that, yeah, I think that's covered. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.